Good. And if you, another few years, they're gonna be $1 billion tech. And, right.
I know it. Unbelievable.
Thanks. Finish your reading up. It wouldn't see what's me. See.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. It's 1 p.m. We're going to call the joint committee meeting between Criminal Justice and Public Safety and Health Services meeting to order for April 18th. I would ask if there's any privilege of the floor, any comments, any members of the public, any committee members, any other Board of Supervisors members? Seeing none, we have just one discussion item. That's the SPCA of Upstate New York funding needs to sustain operations. I'm going to ask the county attorney if he would fill us in on what the issues are here.
Certainly. Thank you for that opportunity, Chairman. I appreciate it. I am going to take a moment and just pull up a couple of files on my computer. And then we will talk about the issue regarding SPCA of Upstate New York. And I apologize for the delay. I just found out that I would be addressing this for the committee today.
Unless there's somebody that wants to weigh in on this before our county attorney does.
No, if I could just kind of, I would like to, with all due respect, if I could just kind of lay some parameters and I guess, once again, as I've said before in the past on other pieces, kind of guide rails to help guide the conversation and what the decision points are going to be today. So specifically, I guess big picture, what I'd like to do is make sure we're all in the right frame of mind and frame of reference, which is this was a proposal that initially had come into ARPA looking for ARPA funding to assist in the continuation of services by the SPCA of Upstate New York. And the general tenor of that presentation is financially, they're not going to be able to continue. And they do represent the primary, if not only, pound and or shelter in Warren, available to Warren County and Washington County at the current time. So with that in mind, the ARPA committee was not able to take any positive action. There was some conversations about further discussions with the not-for-profit, and they provided information that's been circulated and posted online regarding what their needs would be to continue operations on a monthly basis, which is the document you have in front of you. But the shift I asked the supervisors to keep in mind and to view today's conversation through is that shift away from the amazing ability we had to give away over $12 million of ARPA funding and back to where we are now, which is this would be every day of the week in relation to the SPCA providing services to the county under state statutes. So this is not a request that the county can give a gift to the SPCA. The question really, I believe, before the committee is there an interest and desire under agricultural markets law and some of the requirements and abilities of the county to go maybe backwards in time, as I understand it, to a place where the county is providing a source and services for a pound and a shelter under agriculture and markets law, section 114. And also the question of dog control officers for the towns and the village. And what, if any, interest is there in the county maybe taking back? And I definitely defer to the supervisors who were here prior to the current shift, which moved the county away from that line item. But the discussion and the issue is, in what manner can the SPCA of upstate New York or any other entity enter into a contract with Warren County for funding to provide a service? And do those services work out to cover what those expenses are that have been provided to us by SPCA of upstate New York? I'm going to say that's kind of part one. And if there's an interest in that movement and that conversation and that discussion, part two might be, well, how do you fund that? And is there some other interested parties out there or municipalities that might be interested in contributing to that type of a contract with the SPCA of upstate New York? And I keep using them as the example because they're the specific reason we're here. But the reality is if this committee were to move forward with a resolution for board consideration, before we would do that, we would have to consider a request for proposals under the Warren County contracting policy. Because again, we're not in the land of ARPA, we're in the land of, these are taxpayer dollars and there's a service that's needed and required at a price. And that would have to be put out in the form of an RFP. And our purchasing officer is present here for this meeting as well. So I guess that's kind of maybe big picture format. I'm not in a place to really lead a discussion as far as the details of what these committees may seek and require. You know, an additional piece is it's a joint meeting, my understanding, because this also affects our county policy regarding rabies and ensuring that there's a facility to assist in the, I'll say, the collection and monitoring of any animals that have indicated symptoms or signs of rabies infection during the quarantine period. So big picture is there, under agricultural markets law, I'm aware of two areas that come into play. One is the ability of a county to either directly provide, as Saratoga County has, a pound and shelter, or to enter into a contract with a not-for-profit for the purpose of providing those services. And then the second part would be the other area of services where a county may, they're not required to, but they may become involved, which is in the area of dog control and dog control officers, which is a mandatory requirement on towns and villages across New York State, and of course, within Warren County. So I'm not sure if there's any initial questions or discussions on those points. I'm hoping that's kind of clear, and if not, let me know.
All right. Thank you, Larry, for the part A anyhow. Any questions for Larry on this? Supervisor.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it might be helpful, especially for those of us who weren't on the board in the past, when we did have a professional relationship with I think another provider, to kind of get a quick Reader's Digest version of the recent history of what the county has done to ensure that these types of services and opportunity programs are available to all county residents. And then my other question is, that's a comment. My other question would be, haven't we as a board, when there's an emergency or a need to get something done, been able to kind of facilitate appropriations of money until we can get to that point where the RFP process is done, whether that's a continuation of a current contract that we have, or if you're understanding what I'm asking.
I think I do. I mean, under contracting law, under state law, there's certain provisions when there's a public emergency that's in play. I'm hard pressed how this would qualify under the statute as a public emergency. I can certainly see how some people would feel it's an emergency, but the definition and the purpose for that public emergency provision is very, very different and much more strenuous than my understanding of what the facts are here. And that's just from a legal perspective, not a personal perspective about SPCA and the services that they provide.
Thanks, Lee.
Supervisor Leggett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's two issues here. One is need and the other is responsibility. And the need around the county for dog control related items. I know that one of the private veterinary facilities is no longer harboring dogs that are brought in by our animal control officers. And I do think they are going over to the SPCA of upstate New York for that, so that there's a need of animal control officers to take their detainees someplace. And, for that, I think it is appropriate that the SPCA gets some reimbursement for that. And then it comes down onto responsibility on several years ago when we had $100,000 a year contract with the local SPCA, that there was a big discussion. What's the responsibility of the county to pick up that bill? We've lived without that service and that cost for 4 years now, maybe going on to 5. So those I see are the two issues that we need to be taking up here.
Supervisor Smith.
Yeah. I just want to confirm something you said. Is this the only shelter you said in Washington and Warren County? Is that?
That's my understanding, yes, especially the only one that would be considered an incorporated humane society, which is really the key words in the statute for purposes of the pound shelter and animal control.
I'm just wondering how much Washington County should be involved in this if we're going to, if they're using it, shouldn't they have some contribution to this?
And if I could, Supervisor, that would be kind of that part B.
Okay.
Where if there's an interest and a desire on behalf of supervisors to move this forward, because there's both a responsibility and a need. What that looks like would be important, but then the second part would be who would be potentially some parties or other municipalities, which may or may not include Washington County, that would want to or be willing to participate in the project or process, or let's say contract. Actually, that would be a more accurate way to phrase it.
Supervisor David.
Now, the SPCA of upstate New York, currently they're located, are they on Queensbury Avenue? Mm-hmm. Okay.
My understanding is they're on the east side as you're traveling north. So they're directly on the Washington County border,
mm-hmm.
with the west side being the airport and Warren County border.
It'd still be on the east side if you were traveling south too.
Somewhere out there's someone I served with in the 82nd Airborne Division who is making fun of me right now. Duly noted. Thank you.
Does any of you have personal recent experience with them in terms of the level of service? What's the current status, Supervisor Leggett?
It's good. It's good. We have used them. We have a very good animal control officer. And when she gets into difficult situations, she relies on them. They've been very responsive.
Is it, do they rely on them to bring an animal to them or for a call out to assist?
Call out to assist, usually like in placement for them, or if we can't hold them for so many days from our own shelter.
Is that weekends, all times of the day, evenings? They're responsive. Supervisor Smith.
Yeah, so just what Supervisor Liggett said about the need, and if we don't do this, what happens? I guess is a question of what happens, these services disappear. What happens to our communities with these animals and these issues?
I don't know. I mean, all we have is what their current costs are. There's nobody here, I assume, right, from SPCA? Were they aware of this? Anybody know?
They were invited.
You know?
I don't mind sharing a little bit of information should you want.
I would like to hear from you.
Go ahead. please.
So it might be helpful if I start with a little bit of a background because animal control in Warren County is a little complicated. Pat and I have been living it since the early 90s. So I think we've partnered with a lot of people throughout the years. Health Services has been tasked with the rabies prevention program since 1993, basically responsible for rabies clinics for animals, for people that have been exposed, getting them treatment, for testing animals, etc. Obviously, our nurses haven't gone to collect foxes and dogs and things like that. So we've had to work with other agencies. There are regulations like, our county attorney has talked about with public health laws that govern us with our rabies program, but also ag and market laws that govern the towns, but also, with the animal cruelty laws. And then in addition to all the New York State guidance and recommendations and algorithms that dictate how we do the programs and follow up. With animals in general, the Department of Environmental Conservation deals with wildlife. But that doesn't mean that every once in a while, public health doesn't get a call about a skunk in somebody's yard, or if we're not able to get in touch with DEC and it might be a health safety issue that law enforcement hasn't come to our aid and taken care of an animal and done what they need to do to help us. But in general, wildlife goes through Department of Environmental Conservation. The towns through Ag and Market technically are the dog control requirement. Some towns have opted in the past to contract that out to an agency, but that's above and beyond the SPCA role. But if a town was unable to hire an individual, they can hire an agency to do this. We talked about public health, law enforcement, and I don't mean to speak for Terry, he can follow up and correct me, but law enforcement predominantly handles the animal cruelty cases from the sense of arrest. I think they rely on the advisement of the SPCA to kind of say, here are the laws that are being broken here. And, SPCA also works with our district attorney's office. And also they would respond if the sheriff showed up to an animal cruelty scenario or complaint. They would maybe show up, they'd get the animals, and we all know there might be a house with 30 cats in it, or there might be a rural situation with cows or pigs or horses or whatever. Or, it might be animals that have been neglected, but like the sheriffs would respond. You'd want an agency to be able to come and meet them, collect the animals, get the animals to where they need to go for boarding, for medical care, medical checks. And also feeding. I mean, anybody that has a cat or dogs notice the cat food has gone like way up. The dog food's gone way up since the pandemic. So all the SPCA's expenses have gone up. I think what we're looking to do in the sheriff's office and public health and the administrator's office had a meeting a couple weeks ago. Time flies when you're having fun. Might have been last week, not sure. But we're just looking to be sure that adequate resources are in place. Because so many different agencies are relying on this SPCA organization right now, they have, like all of us, problems with staffing, problems with expenses and everything going up. And they have lost their security in knowing that they have the financial security to pay their rent. They're like on a day-to-day basis kind of thing. I do know that, and I've worked with this agency for a long time. I do know that most of the leaders of this agency are forgoing their paychecks to be able to buy food for these animals or pay rent or whatever. I think from a Warren County perspective, if we're going to be selfish, if we're going to ask for them to respond, we should be paying them some type of call out fee so that we're assured that somebody's going to show up. I think we should pay a shelter fee so that in the event we have a house that's got 30 cats that needs to be collected, we have a place to put these cats, because right now this is the one and only place. And if the shelter folds, then we have nothing. I know there's some neighboring counties that actually pay for their own shelter and run their shelter. They're in like the $400,000 range for that. And I don't know as you want to really be staffing that and taking that responsibility on. So we might be better to support something that's already in place. I think way back when we worked with other agencies and the county put up $100,000 to support this service several years ago. I think, and actually it went up quickly because like in 2014, it might have been $8,000 when an agent, and that used to be when our vet at Glens Falls Animal Hospital did our sheltering for us, and they were the Humane Society. An organization came in, sold us a good. And then in 2015, that went up to $20,000. In 2016, that went up to $80,000. And I think in like 2017, it went up to $100,000. That organization not only had the county's $100,000 to do this, they also had a budget or a bank account of like $200,000, of which they quickly depleted. I think the proposal here is very reasonable because we were paying $100,000 before the pandemic. And God knows every expense has gone up since. I think this organization is looking at a realistic way for them to stay in business, but to assure us that they can respond to the sheriff's calls for these animal cruelty calls while then being able to shelter these animals. I personally am support of the group because I've worked with them from a long time. I think it's a realistic, ask. I think that it's mutually beneficial in the sense that we're putting some security in their hat. It doesn't mean that they're still not going to fundraise, from the adoption side of the business. And if they choose to work with Washington County to respond to Washington County's animal cruelty cases or Saratoga for theirs, then they need to put some money in the coffer. But at the end of the day, if Saratoga and Washington County choose for this organization not to help them with the animal cruelty, we need to be assured that we have a shelter to be able to put our animals in unless we want to start running our own. I do feel that it's critical. I know there's a lot of these cases aren't just like have the sheriff's office call, say there's 30 animals in a house or there's an abandoned horse or pig or whatever. These are cases that then have to go through our legal system. And while they're going through the legal system, somebody may or may not be in jail and somebody may or may not be able to care for these animals, or maybe we choose that these people are not fit for the animals. But at the end of the day, they're animals that could be boarded for 2 or 3 years following every kind of delay in the court system you can think of. And in the end of the day, somebody's having to pay to board these animals, feed these animals, care for them medically. So I don't know all the answers, have had a lot of experience in working with the DEC and the shelters and the vets and everybody else. And I don't know, Terry, do you want to follow up on anything that I might have missed?
I will when you're done.
Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, Chairman Garassi. This is a collaborative.
Feel free. Under Sheriff.
Oops.
Just dealing with the SPCA and for several years, I've had nothing but positive. I can just run just a few numbers quickly. So in 2 years, we've had 1,111 dog or animal complaints. That's at the sheriff's office countywide, and we're 640 all other animal complaints. I can tell you that
I can get a call at 6:30 in the morning from the SPCA, and they'll tell me before I even have a chance to look. They've already sent their investigative team out, or they've spoke to somebody on the phone, and they've either been to the scene or will be going to the scene even before law enforcement. It's not a job for these folks. They're passionate about it. They really are. They can tell the difference between feelings and a crime. And that saves us a lot of time on the law enforcement side of this. They're able to really separate that and point a person in the right direction. If we have a dog bite and it's a family pet, they point those people in the right direction. They really do. They know the difference, and it's much easier for us. The paperwork is super clean. It's provided to us. We can meet folks at court to serve the paperwork, and they even draw up their own warrants when they're ready. So they know the difference, and it's nice to have somebody behind you that'll take 30 cats, because I will sneeze all the way to the shelter. But that's all I really have.
Undersheriff, do you know if they assist? Cruelty is one issue, but do they assist with loose animals, found, surrendered dogs? Somebody who wants to surrender the dog has nowhere to place it. Do they help with that? Does anybody know?
I don't know about the surrender part of it. I know when we have a dog right now in the town of Queensbury, it's nice to have a spot to bring them. Most of the, we will put them in the back of the car of our police patrol car, take a photo of it, try to get it out on social media, go and take it for a ride for a little while, and then we have to, unfortunately, bring it to the shelter. I think a lot of our patrol folks dislike bringing an animal to the shelter, would rather find a home for it before that. But I know they're very receptive to it. If I called Kathy now and said I had 2 dogs from Hague, they would.
Okay, thank you.
Not to pick on Hague.
Supervisor Conover.
This is a little bit like deja vu, because some of these issues we visited some years ago. The statistics that the undersheriff just reported, you have to remember when that police officer responds in that car, it ties up that police officer for some period of time. So if you take did you say 1,100?
1,111.
1,111 times some number of hours to get there, gauge the situation. You can imagine if there's no one to respond, no one on the animal side to respond, you could tie up that officer in patrol car for a significant period of time. And then you have afterwards, as Janelle pointed out, possible court proceedings and things like that follow on relative to that. So am I reading? I have 2 questions, if I may.
Sure, go ahead.
Is the 2 sentences on the bottom of the budget sheet, is that actually a proposal, a service proposal fee structure? In other words, that they would like to be able to bill at a rate of $200 for up to 3 hours on the scene, additional charges above 3 hours billed at $50 an hour, and transportation of animals, if any, and then like some mileage reimbursement. Am I reading that correctly? Okay.
And they're doing it for free right now.
Yeah.
Right. So that brings me over to purchasing, and a question for purchasing. If these folks are a sole source, there's no other source to provide the service in our area, then I suppose if that's true, then I suppose we, I don't know if I use the word negotiate, but we're going to need to sit down and come to some understanding relative to this per our purchasing requirements, and enter into a service arrangement, hopefully a multi-year arrangement, so we're not back here 2 months from now or 3 months from now having to engage this again. And so, I mean, all good service arrangements have everybody benefits, right? They benefit in that they can continue to financially, that they can do what they need to do, and we benefit in that we have a resource to go to in situations like the one described. I'm very, I would like to see at least very minimum today. I think we should authorize our health department and our purchasing department and our legal department to move forward with solidifying some type of service arrangement in compliance with the law and is hopefully relevant to the need that's out there. It's not hopefully not a Band-Aid kind of thing, something that's going to help them stay strong and help us provide the services that we need to provide. That would be my recommendation for today.
Well, do we want to hear part B first or?
Well, I just on part A, I just want to put like an asterisk next to the sole source comment. That's something we need to look at a little more carefully. The purchasing officer and myself had a brief conversation this morning about this topic. And we'd have to talk a little bit more about whether this would be a sole source or if it does go through the RFP process as quick as it can.
Well, I think on the RP process, if we can move through that quickly, that would be a good thing. And on that, you could, I think our purchasing department, I think we have the ability to award based on best service. Best value. So whether they're a sole source or a best value, whichever way is determined by our purchasing department and or our legal department and health department. I find either approach acceptable.
My recommendation would be for it to go through the sheriff's department because they're the ones doing the animal cruelty. Our rabies piece is kind of okay right now, but I mean, don't mind being part of it, don't mind helping it, don't mind providing any information, but it's really the sheriff's department that this contract is going to be the most benefit to. If you want it to go through health services, that's fine, but I just wanted to point that out.
Whichever department should be the lead department. As to how I would say it.
Supervisor Leggett?
In the beginning, and the clerk could correct me on this, contract for similar services back was legislative board. It's covered by legislative board. And then at one point, we realized we really didn't have good contractual oversight through there. You needed somebody that was more engaged. So that's how it got moved over to the sheriff's office at that point in time as well. And then as time went on, realized that, somehow on the contracts and whatnot, it still wasn't good enough on oversight. I think that had more to do with the design of the contract though. So whoever's willing to house it though, and I think under a department or an office is appropriate.
Going to need to be a responsible department that provides the oversight, monitors it, refreshes and renews it when it's time to do that.
Right, back through committee and yep.
Any other comments?
We
Supervisor
really have a
McDevitt?
need and I'm fully supportive of trying to move forward in whatever the most appropriate way is. Just a short little commentary. As we had this discussion here, it jogged my memory a little bit, but about 6 or 7 years ago, I live on Hunter Street in Glens Falls, and it was a Saturday morning. It was about 7 a.m, an early riser. So look in my backyard from my kitchen, and there is an Alaskan Malamute in my backyard. I said, "Oh my goodness, I have a new friend, a large animal." I then start moving around, and I had left my back gate open, so I closed the gate, petted the dog, and lo and behold, I discover not in my backyard yet, but a second Alaskan Malamute. Okay, so oh my goodness, so I got the second Malamute, put him in my backyard. I obviously don't have a great fear of dogs because they're a pretty good sized animal. So I gave them some water, I fed them, and at that time, and I'm not even sure what the process is, but in the city of Glens Falls, the police department, they were the pickup of animals. So I then called the police department, and these gentlemen showed up, and he looked in my backyard, and he had a little bit of you could tell he was a little bit nervous. Okay. I said, let me take care of it for you. So I took and got one in the back, and then the second one in the back. But my only point in mentioning this is that even going back 6 or 7 years ago, the facility on Queensbury Avenue, I think was functioning, and that's where I think the police officer brought them. So it's the right thing to do. Animals deserve our compassion, and we have to do the right thing. So my full support. So.
Supervisor Merlino.
Thank you for letting me speak. I'm full support. We got to do something for these type of animals and for their problems. My only question is this a contract for the county of Warren County, or is this what they need as a whole? Saratoga County or somebody else?
I don't have the answer. I don't know if the county attorney does.
I don't know that I have the answer to that either. I haven't been engaged with conversations directly with the SPCA. I only have the information that the supervisors have today, but maybe one of the department heads.
I'm not sure how we actually receive this. I mean, on the face of it, it just looks like a worksheet, right? It's not on their letterhead. It's not a request to anyone with anything more specific than we just see here. So, Janelle, do you have more information?
I think after the sheriff's office and health services and the administrator's office met, we actually called and spoke with SPCA of upstate and said, what could you do for us? And I believe our administrator asked them to forward a proposal to him. So he did get a letter because the sheriff's department and public health were copied on, their letter to our administrator. And then I think the administrator probably took out all the fluff and tried to streamline it for your worksheet today.
Okay. So in place today, are any of these fees in place today?
Right now and all through the pandemic, and the sheriff's office can provide more information, but my understanding is all this has been offered at no cost, including the boarding of animals, the feeding of animals, and the vet that's been providing the service has been pro bono. And just, if I will, the veterinarian scenario is becoming very difficult in Warren County. A lot of the older vets that Pat and I've worked with for many years are retiring or want to retire, but they don't have people to come in to fill their shoes. So they're choosing to work longer just because of their commitment to the animals in our community. But for anybody that has an animal that has an emergency after hours, you're pretty much driving to Latham or Albany or somewhere for that service, because all of our local emergency services and our local vet practices aren't able to sustain those hours.
And the new vets coming in they don't want weekends at all.
All right.
So or
And
evenings.
Do we know if this fee structure, should we agree to it? Is it an annual fee, multi-year, or?
So I believe they were coming up with around 7,500 of itemized fees for a month, which equaled out to around 90,000 a year. And my 2 cents is I feel like we were paying much more than that previously. And I do think that this is a realistic proposal in the sense that they really are just asking for bare bones, because they also are working on fundraising for their adoption piece of it. They're working with other counties. I think this, to answer your previous question, when they sent this letter, I believe this was a proposal for Warren County, not Warren County to also help Washington County, Saratoga. I think their thought is they would do something similar to the other counties. And then, as they get more funding, maybe they can adjust things. But right now, we're looking for the assurance that we have a shelter.
Okay, well, sorry, you have to speak for them. I have one other question. So if it's a $90,000 annual cost, next line says cruelty call outs at a rate of $200. That's on top of the 90,000?
Yes, but I mean, I think the thought is some take one person, some take 2 or 3 people to come out, for the animals. And some are just come and get the animal, and some are there 6 or 7 hours. They take pictures, they get statements done, they have vets documenting things.
Right.
There's a lot of.
But that's not part of the
preparation.
$90,000 fee?
The 90,000, I believe, is more for the power, the phones, the food, the medical expense, the
It's an
staffing.
addition. It's an addition.
I think the other is the call out rate to assure that they have people that are gonna be
Go
able
at
to.
2 a.m. or, be there at 6 a.m. or-
Yeah, it's, again, it's unfortunate. I don't know if they were invited, if anybody knows they were invited or not.
I can say that I think they were waiting on maybe the administrator to ask them if they needed to be at the meeting. And when I spoke with Kathy a couple days ago, she hadn't heard if she needed to be here or not. And I don't know as I would totally be, there were maybe some lines crossed. I don't think they knew that they could just show up.
Supervisor Conover?
Yeah, and that's why I think this needs to be worked at the staff level. With the departments that I mentioned. I mean, one of the things that's lacking here, because of the way this has evolved, is we need to have a department that has responsibility relative to this matter. So part of what I think we should do is to assign that responsibility to a department so that things come to us in a timely fashion, particularly problems like the type we're discussing here today, where we could lose the service, and then what? And now what? And we don't ever, that's not a good situation. So, I mean, if we have a department that's assigned with these responsibilities, whatever the lead department is, it's their responsibility to work these issues, bring in other departments, county attorney, county administrator as appropriate, and then come to us with the options, the alternatives, the problem, and then we can make a decision on the best way to proceed. And I think that because I would agree with, I could read this to be that, well, this is their operating budget, but this is not the revenue. This is not, they don't show the revenue side on this. They don't show the expenses. And I think I'm looking at, I believe what we're looking at is the operating budget, the expense side, what income they would derive from Warren County, at least in part, it would seem to me, would be dependent upon the final 2 sentences here. I mean, if they get called out, the 1,100 calls the sheriff's department makes, I don't know how many times the SPCA would be called out in that, but it will say that they get called out 30% of the time, 40% of the, something like that.
I have about 77 this year, or I'm sorry, last year. I don't have the second year numbers, but 77 times they call.
77
77,
times.
yes, sir.
So it would be, but I think that's the kind of, those are the kind of numbers that the staff could work, that our people could, you all could work out for us, and along with purchasing, so we know what we're getting a proposal on, because the proposal is going to be a proposal for service, right? And it's going to detail what that service is, and I would imagine we won't know exactly how many call outs, so it would have to float with the number of call outs. It would have to be on some type of call out basis, and the same thing with the mileage that they're advancing here. Then we would have something in front of us that I think we could really act on, because whatever we do, we're probably going to send it to the board anyway, correct? We're probably going to have to go to the board anyway, so the sooner we get to show on the road, the better. I mean, let's get this brought into shape and work with purchasing and get us where we need to get it and get it back here and as soon as possible. Would be mine.
Supervisor Smith?
Yeah, I agree with Supervisor Conover. I think that's probably the best. If they can get a proposal together more than just this and come in, and maybe even they can come in next meeting and present their thoughts. But on these call outs, I'm just wondering if it's a cruelty call out, would these be passed through the fines that they would receive if they were charged?
I can't answer that question, sir. I can imagine if I'm sure they bill, the suspect in this case. I'm sure they bill it, but again, a lot of these are abandoned animals. They can't afford, they're evicted from they just don't have, they don't get a lot of money or fines from that.
All right.
I would go as far as saying if you feel you need a committee member or two to sit in on your meetings, I'd be happy, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to volunteer myself to participate if you felt that was needed. If it's not needed, that's okay as well.
And here, be happy to.
Terrific. Thank you. Larry, do you want to complete your thoughts on this?
I'm just very grateful that Janelle Jones was here to address the details. I apologize. I didn't come here with any intention of really speaking much other than on the legal parameters. So thank you very much.
Okay. So path forward. Make a recommendation. Formal recommendation to have accommodation between the sheriff's office and health services.
And legal and purchasing and Mrs. McDevitt, I'd say Mr. McDevitt and I would be happy to participate if you need us to participate, if that's acceptable to everyone. If somebody else would rather fill my spot, I'm be happy to step aside. But I'd be happy to sit in and offer whatever.
Yeah.
That's emotional second.
Okay, I don't think we need a motion, but as long as we have consensus, anybody disagree? Okay, all right. So that's how we'll move forward. Supervisor Leggett.
And just going forward, there's $90,000 a year. Looks like the annual yearly. I can't imagine that they're paying more than $3,000 a month for rent or more than $484 a
Okay.
month for it. So,
Well, we'll get the specific details in short order. That will be helpful.
so
I
that
thank everyone though.
if anything comes through, it'd be a proportion of.
That's right.
Terrific. Thank you. Any other discussion on this item? All right, move on. Privilege of the floor. Any other discussion items? Committee members, other supervisors, members of the public? Supervisor Leggett.
One other point, we did have an animal cruelty case in town of Chester. SPCA was involved with that. New York State Police, the troopers were responding to it though. So I don't know if they need to be included at all, but they respond to most of the calls up in Chester for us.
Good. Thank you. All right, I thank everyone for attending this special meeting. Accept the motion to adjourn. Supervisor Conover, second. Supervisor Smith on the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. We're adjourned.
I appreciate that. Yeah.